The rain had been falling all night in Manila, drumming a steady rhythm against the rusted tin roofs of the slums. In a tiny shack barely larger than a closet, 12-year-old Arnel sat on the edge of his creaky bed, strumming a cracked guitar that had only 4 strings left. His voice was soft but steady, cutting through the sound of the storm. Outside, the muddy streets were alive with the cries of vendors and the splash of tricycle tires, but in that dim room, time seemed to stand still. Arnel wasn't practicing for school, he hadn't been able to attend for over a year. His mother worked long hours in a laundry shop, his father had left when Arnel was 6. Their meals often consisted of rice and a little broth. Music was the only thing that made his world feel larger than the alley he lived in. Every night, after helping his mother carry water and wash clothes, he sang, sometimes for his neighbors, sometimes for stray cats, and sometimes just for himself. But this morning was different. On the low wooden table lay a crumpled flyer, Philippines Talent Quest, auditions open to all. A traveling talent show was visiting the city, and the first prize was 500,000 Cuban pesos, enough to move his family out of the slums and pay for his sister's schooling. His mother had found the flyer in the laundry shop and brought it home, her hands trembling. "Anak," she said softly that morning, "you have a gift. Maybe they will hear it." Arnel looked at her worn face, the deep lines carved by years of hard work, and felt a swell of determination. "Mama, I'll try," he whispered. The audition venue was a world Arnel had never seen. Bright lights, cameras, and polished floors replaced the muddy streets he knew. Contestants bustled around, dressed in glittering clothes. Arnel arrived barefoot, wearing a faded white shirt and shorts. In his hands, he clutched the broken guitar, wrapped in an old rice sack to protect it from the rain. Some contestants whispered and stared. One boy laughed. "Hey, are you here to clean the floors?" But Arnel just smiled shyly and took a seat in the corner. When his number was called, he stepped onto the stage. 3 judges sat behind a long desk, 2 men and 1 woman, all dressed sharply. They looked at him with curiosity. "What's your name, son?" the woman judge asked gently. "Arnel P," he replied softly, "from Tonda." "And what will you sing for us today?" Arnel hesitated, then said, "A song my father used to play. Bridge over troubled water." The audience murmured, "An American classic, not an easy choice, especially for someone so young." The male judge leaned back skeptically. "All right, Arnel. Whenever you're ready." Arnel closed his eyes. For a moment, the bright lights and the huge hall disappeared. He imagined his mother washing clothes in the shop, his little sister playing barefoot in the alley, and the sound of rain on their roof. Then, he began. His voice was fragile at first, trembling like a candle flame in the wind. But as the melody unfolded, it grew warmer, richer, carrying a depth no one expected from a child. He didn't just sing the words, he lived them. Each note seemed to carry the weight of every hardship, every dream, every moment of love and loss. When he reached the line, "Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down," his voice cracked, not from weakness, but from emotion. The hall grew silent. The judges leaned forward. In the front row, a man in a suit who had been checking his phone slowly put it down. A cameraman stopped adjusting his lens. The audience was spellbound. And then, halfway through the song, something extraordinary happened. A string on Arnel's guitar snapped with a sharp twang. The sound echoed through the hall. Gasps rose from the audience. Arnel froze for a split second, but then, without missing a beat, he set the guitar down and continued a cappella. The raw purity of his voice filled the air, carrying the song higher than the broken instrument ever could. His small frame seemed to expand, and the emotion in his eyes made it impossible to look away. By the time he sang the final line, tears were streaming down his cheeks, and he wasn't the only one. The woman judge dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The audience erupted into applause so thunderous that Arnel flinched. The male judge leaned into his microphone, his voice thick. "Arnell. I've heard this song 100 times, but tonight, I heard it for the first time. You didn't just sing it, you gave it meaning." The second judge stood up. He paused, his voice breaking, "This is why we have this show. To find voices like yours." And then, in a moment Arnell would never forget, the woman judge slammed her hand onto the golden buzzer. Golden confetti rained down from the ceiling. The crowd stood, cheering and clapping, some even shouting his name. Arnell looked around, bewildered, clutching his broken guitar like a lifeline. He saw his mother in the audience, her face wet with tears. She had borrowed a neighbor's blouse just to come. Arnell's knees went weak, and he ran into her arms. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Clips of his audition went viral on social media. Americans, Australians, Filipinos, people from every corner of the world shared his video, calling him the boy who sang with his soul. Donations poured in, enough to replace his guitar, pay for his sister's school fees, and move his family into a small apartment outside the slums. But Arnell didn't forget where he came from. On weekends, he returned to Tondo with bags of rice and bread, sharing them with neighbors. He visited the old alley, singing for the kids who now looked at him with wide, hopeful eyes. One day, a TV reporter asked, "Arnell, after all you've been through, what does music mean to you now?" He smiled, his voice steady. "Music is like a bridge," he said. "It can carry you from where you are, to where you dream to be. But if you get to the other side, you don't destroy the bridge. You help others cross it too." Months later, Arnell stood on the grand final stage, wearing a suit for the first time in his life. The lights were blinding, the hall enormous, but he wasn't afraid. He looked into the crowd and spotted his mother, holding his sister's hand. The orchestra began to play. This time, his guitar had all 6 strings, but the real instrument was his heart. He sang not just for the judges or the audience, but for every child who had ever felt small, invisible, or trapped by circumstances. When the last note faded, there was a pause, a breathless, sacred silence, and then the hall erupted. The judges stood, clapping and smiling through tears. Arnell didn't win first place that night. But something far greater happened. A famous music producer offered him a scholarship to a music academy, with a promise to mentor him. For Arnell, it wasn't just the start of a career, it was the start of a new life. Years later, Arnell would sing on international stages, his voice matured but still carrying that same depth of feeling. And every time he finished a concert, he would quietly slip away, returning to the slums with his guitar, sitting cross-legged with the children, teaching them songs. Because Arnell knew that no matter how far you travel, you must never forget the place that gave you your song.